Welcome back to All About Money on HKIBC. I'm Chloe Pham. The global shipping industry is in uncharted waters as vessel operators are under pressure to cut down on carbon emissions and switch to green energy. With over 80% of global trade by volume transported by sea, the industry will have a pivotal role to play in reaching carbon neutrality. And now new regulations by the International Maritime Organization are under the pipeline. So joining us to shed more insights on the challenges and opportunities ahead is Mr. Andrew Rigden Green, a partner at international law firm Stephenson Harwood. So welcome to our show, Andrew. It's great to have you today. First thing first, let's talk about the new IMO grading system. It seems that is a big deal for the Asian businesses as well, because now all of the ships will be graded by A, B, C, D, E, different kind of standards. Could you run us through this new system and what does it also mean for the Asian shipping industries?
Yeah, thank you, Chloe. It's an interesting and difficult challenge to decarbonize the maritime industry. And a number of measures have been put in place and expressions of desire and goals in reducing carbon emissions have been made by governments across the world. And now the shipping industry is trying to grapple with the practicalities of putting those ambitions into effect. The IMO, the International Maritime Organisation, has proposed a number of measures to reduce the carbon intensity of the maritime industry. And the grading system that you talked about is to do with the carbon intensity of the ships themselves, there are a number of measures which are put in place to measure the carbon output, the performance of the ships, and how those ships perform over an annual period, and then that is assessed on an annual period, and then the ship will receive a grading. And if the ships are rated A, B, and C, they're considered to be okay, good to okay. And if they are D and E, they're considered not to be okay. And currently, as the system stands, the owners of ships with D and E rated ships will have to put in place remedial measures to improve their rating to A, B, and C. So there's no fine at present, for example, for not having an ABC rated ship. But the intention is at the moment that charterers, people who want to employ the services of the ship, will be more attracted to ABC ships than D and E ships, and therefore ABC ships will command a higher price in the market.
So we need to get ready for that as well, this change.
Absolutely, yes.
Meanwhile, the European Union Parliament also proposed the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, or let's call it CSDDD, in 2022. And this directive, still in the legislative process, is expected to require sustainable climate reporting in or around 2025, and it will apply for the European Union companies or those companies who are having trade with the European Union companies. So how will this new directive also impose an impact for us who are running business in Asia or in Hong Kong as well, because we're also an international shipping hub?
It's a really brilliant question, because there's a massive danger to think that we're far away from Europe and therefore none of these things are going to affect us. But the reality is the CSDDD requires companies that operate in Europe to report and to put in place climate transition plans, not just for themselves, but their direct suppliers and their indirect suppliers as well, which will include transport industry. And these, although these regulations are not yet in place, European companies are going to be choosing suppliers that do fit those criteria. So even though the European legislation has no direct effect on Asian businesses, whether that's the manufacturers or the transport suppliers, they will be at a competitive disadvantage unless they actually put in place measures that will comply with the CSDDD.
Would you say that Hong Kong government should also boost for example, enhance its legislative efforts in order to prepare all of those, let's say, shipping businesses in the city to also cope with this kind of new climate, or let's say landscape?
That's a very difficult question to answer directly, because legislation and regulation is normally about guarding how people operate their businesses. And in this circumstance, the legislative process should be encouraging business to step forward and meet these challenges. So if there were to be any sort of challenges, it would be incentivization to move or transition to a greener supply chains, to greener economy, to greener technology. So in some of the expressions in the annual budget this year, we've seen a lot of very positive proposals about green technology. So I would encourage further steps along those lines in order to assist businesses to move towards a more sustainable economy.
Other barriers, meanwhile, the shipping industry faces in transitioning to the low carbon practices include, for example, the use of alternative fuels, because we're trying to develop new engines for those kind of shipping industry as well. And now, while liquefied and natural gas is leading the race, accounting for the majority of alternative fuel ships orders last year, methanol is also gaining ground, and there are also orders from the hydrogen-fueled ships. What do you make of these latest trends? Do you think the methanol will be able to gain more grounds later on?
It's difficult to give an absolute answer. If there was a single fuel that could replace hydrocarbon fuel, then we wouldn't really be having this discussion. The issue is there's no one fuel that will answer all the questions of decarbonisation within the maritime space. And each of the alternative fuels presents its own difficulties and problems. LNG, for example, is only a transition fuel in the sense that it's still a carbon-based fuel. Methanol still has carbon elements to it, and the production of methanol may not be as green as it ought to be. So there are a number of challenges around that. The zero carbon fuels such as ammonia and hydrogen are quite difficult and expensive to produce. The supply of those fuels is not universal, and in the case of hydrogen, there simply isn't the technology to be able to propel ocean-going vessels using hydrogen only as a fuel. So there are lots of different challenges around that. Maybe methanol will have some advantage at the moment, because at the moment it probably presents fewer challenges than others. It's already an industrial fuel in some areas of the world and industries, but the GHG emissions from methanol are not insignificant.
So we are also encountering the technical bottleneck as well when it comes to the future fuels as well, to develop the future fuels as well. But some other barriers could be including the possible disputes in the shipping industry as well, because this industry is by large unregulated.
Correct.
So as a lawyer, how do you say the legal sector could also offer its helping hand in boosting the city's transition into low carbon economy? And we know that there's also some possible disputes regarding various projects in the voluntary carbon market, because we do not have such regulations. How could we overcome such barriers as well?
There's quite a lot to unpack there. One of the biggest beauties and challenges of the maritime industry is that it is very unregulated, in the sense that it's a market-driven economy. So freedom of contract and profit drive the decisions that people make. Key to achieving a low-carbon economy will be sharing of information and collaboration. But when you're talking about collaboration between competitors, it becomes quite a challenge. And so in those circumstances...
With antitrust concerns.
Correct. There's antitrust concerns if there is price-sensitive information that's exchanged, for example. But then there's also just taking competitive advantage in certain sectors. One of the issues at the moment, we mentioned the grading of ships, for example, and how the IMO regulations really impose this carbon intensity indicator on ship owners, but frequently ship owners are not themselves the operators of the vessels. So the ships are often operated by a time charter or a sub-time charter, somebody else or a management company. So there need to be contractual obligations between those levels in the sort of ecosystem in order to ensure that parties are not disadvantaged unfairly, and perhaps there's a sharing of the risk, although that of course leads to a question about where the profits and the costs will fall.
So thank you very much for your thoughts, Andrew. It's a great pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for watching All About Money. We'll be back next Sunday night. So until the next time, see you then.